Chia seeds are expensive, so I made a garden to see if I could grow them myself, and 2 years later, I'm here with quite the update. I sprinkled some directly in a pot of soil and then waited 5 months for them to grow. They grew pretty nicely, and before I knew it, it started to get kind of cold outside and the plant, unfortunately, died. But I did notice these little trees sticking out of the soil, and upon further inspection of those little trees, I was pretty excited when I noticed that there were little dark seeds living inside. Chia plants produce blue flowers that eventually develop seeds inside of those flowers, but these flowers were not blue, and I never saw any flowers growing in the tall chia plant in that pot. So you can imagine I was pretty confused to see these seeds popping out of these little trees. But I continued to trust the process and kind of just assumed that they were chia. I extracted all the seeds and got the cute little tiny things on a damp piece of paper towel. Well, actually, I used a piece of Kleenex because I ran out of paper towel because, of course, we had to try to sprout them and then replant them to grow more chia seeds that following year. And y'all, I'm not kidding when I say that I waited 5 months for these things to sprout, and I was sure that they were never gonna grow little tails like I was hoping for. But I never gave up on those little seeds, and I kept spraying their little Kleenex paper towel thingy, and to my surprise, one day I opened up the paper towel and saw little tiny sprouts. And those sprouts actually did resemble chia sprouts, so I just went with it. I planted them in soil, and as they started to grow, I then of course started reading all the comments from you guys. And this is why I love you guys so much, because you helped me realize that these actually may not in fact be chia seeds after all. Some of you informed me that they could instead be red amaranth seeds. And that would technically make sense since I did have a red amaranth flower plant growing in my garden, but I never really even saw flowers grow on my amaranth plant, so I'm not sure how the seeds would fly out and into the chia seed pot. On the other hand, I did think to myself that I had these Marvel of Peru flowers growing really close to the pot of chia flowers, so maybe they could be those? Well, in any case, red amaranth sprouts are edible and they are very nutritious too, so I was still happy I harvested the seeds even if they weren't chia seeds. But in my mind, I really wanted to grow my own chia seeds, so you'll probably already know what I had to do next. I started again with new chia seeds. This time, I was gonna keep the chia seeds away from any potential intruders. I got some seeds, planted them directly in soil, and waited. Now, I planted this new round of chia seeds in about May, and it takes about 120 to 180 days for the harvest of chia seeds to be ready, which meant that the seeds would be ready by September. So I was excited that it would happen quite quickly in the grand scheme of time. And just so you know, a bag of chia seeds that look like this costs about 15 Canadian dollars, but actually about 20 because of that 13% HST tax since Canada rips us a new one on taxes. So this was well worth it to me, okay, to have endless amounts of chia seeds. Plus, it was hard to be patient because I just wanted to know if the cycle would continue and whether or not we would grow a new plant that yields seeds that we could finally harvest. Well, we were about to find out because I continued to water it and check on it for the next 3 whole months, and while I waited, I grew this bike into a rideable garden, and then I rode it around the town. I didn't just tell you that for no reason, okay? Remember this fact, because this is a key factor in what you're about to learn next. Because soon after I finished riding that bike around town, I started to see little flower stalks in that pot that I planted get taller, and soon, before I knew it, September rolled around and that plant was beginning to actually flower. Thank the Lord. And we already know that chia seeds produce these blue purpley flowers, and once those flower petals start to fall off, the seed pods are ready to harvest. But first you need to dry them out, and then apparently you can just shake the seeds right out once they're brown and dry. At the end of October, I thought, okay, the weather is about to turn, I better harvest these flowers sooner rather than later. So I got a plastic bag and started cutting off the flower tops one by one, hoping that they were seed pods. Remember, I never did this before, and I knew we would have to wait to dry them out for about 2 more weeks to actually try and shake the baggie and harvest the seeds. Plus, I also noticed that some chia seeds must have flown around the garden. They pulled a red amaranth because there was a chia plant growing in my pineapple, and there was even a chia plant growing in the crack of my cement. And this is where you need to remember when I told you about the fact that I grew chia seeds on my bike and rode it around town, because now it all started to make sense to me as to how these chia seeds ended up growing in my cement cracks. And that's also how they ended up in the pineapple plant. And this was actually a plus for us, and you're about to find find out why, because these plants where the chia seeds were growing contrary to the other one growing in the pot, I noticed they had more defined seed pods, much bigger, much thicker, and the flowers were growing much closer together in these plants. And I realized that there must be both male and female chia flowers, and we must have had a male one growing in the pot where the flowers looked less defined and more spread apart, and female ones growing in my pineapple plant and in the cement of the crack. I mean, in the crack of the cement, because the flower was closer together and looked more like a seed pod. The male ones will not produce seeds, whereas the female ones will produce seeds. But I had initially harvested the ones that were seemingly male from the pot, and a few weeks had already passed and they dried out, and finally it was time to shake them in the baggie to see if any seeds would come out. And this was finally the moment of truth, and as excited as I was, no seeds came out. I became disappointed, but I was still excited to be learning so much about nature and how different types of seeds grow, because it was in fact confirmed that these were likely the male flowers that I harvested and not the female pods where the seeds live inside, and that's why it was a good thing we did other chia seed projects in the summer, because if we didn't, then no chia seeds would have grown in my pineapple plant or in the cracks of my cement, and then we wouldn't have gotten female flowers that grow actual seed pods, and instead we would have just ended up with male flowers that didn't grow any seeds that we could harvest. So, as time went on, I continued to go outside to check on those pods growing in the garden, hoping that soon they would be ready to dry out and harvest so we could finally get our chia seeds, once and for all. The seed pods looked almost ready in the pineapple after a while. I was getting excited, but by now it was the end of November, and it was getting colder out here in Canada, and I wanted to see if the pods were even ready yet, so I removed a little tiny piece of a flower to see if any seed would fall out, but nothing fell out, so I am gonna wait a few more weeks for this to grow more, and if it gets too cold outside before the pods brown out enough, you already know I'm gonna bring it inside to live in my grow box, grow it indoors so that we can successfully harvest the chia seeds and get our very own homegrown chia seeds finally. It may just take a few weeks longer than if there was full sun out here. So the moral of the story is that you can buy your own seeds from the grocery store for $20, or you can spend that same $20, plant some, wait 7 months, and then possibly not even grow your own. But here on this channel, it's all trial and error. And we did learn so much along the way about how chia plants even grow and how you can harvest them, and we are not giving up. In the coming weeks, we'll cut those seed pods, see if they're ready. If they aren't, we'll bring it inside, grow it a bit more, and then finally see if we had successfully harvested homegrown chia seeds. So I guess now the only question that is left in my mind is, do you think we will finally be able to harvest our own chia seeds?